Pedro from A&P-REACTS. I'm here today with Robin from the Ocean to talk about their upcoming new album. I'm honestly not going to try to pronounce it because I'm absolutely dyslexic, and I have a hell of a time, not only with the title, but with the tracks on this album. But it comes out September 25th on Metal Blade Records. How are you doing?
Very good, very good. You're actually not the only one having difficulty pronouncing the title. I can do it for you. It's Phanerozoic to Mesozoic, Cenozoic.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
Let me start off by asking you this. You guys continue with a concept that started on the previous record into this record. Does that create an extra challenge? Does that create a different set of problems for you guys when you go into the actual process of making the album?
Well, it's making double records always comes with challenges, but we have long learned to embrace those challenges, and I actually really enjoy that. The thing here was that we recorded drums for both records together. So back then, when we rehearsed for that and when we recorded it, everything felt super fresh and cohesive. And then we finished the first part first, which also went really smooth. But then we went on tour for a year with the first part, basically. And once we went back to the second part, the material had aged without us touching it, basically, for like over a year. So we had to get back into the zone. And then I realized when we did that, holy shit, it's very diverse, the material. And at first I didn't really see it come together to become an album. And I was a bit worried about that, but then things really fell into place, and it did become a journey that starts in one place and finishes in a totally different place. And you can't really tell, I think, when you listen to the first track where it's going to end. And that makes me really happy, because I remember thinking about this in the beginning, thinking, I don't know how this is all going to come together. But of course, having a cohesive sound, when all that came together in the mix, that glued everything together, even the very diverse tracks became part of the bigger whole, and it all worked out really, really well, actually.
As a band, how do you guys approach the creation of a record like this? Like, it's a double record, like you said, there's a continuation process, but do you guys divide the workload amongst yourselves? How is the creative process behind the record?
Writing itself for us is a pretty intimate process that usually doesn't involve the whole band. I used to be the only one writing for this band, but on this record, Paul, our drummer, actually wrote 3 tracks of the 9 tracks, so quite a significant amount. But whether it's him or me writing songs, we do that alone at home. Basically, we make pre-productions, we work with programmed drums, and record pilot guitars and synths, and basically get the basic song structure together. And then we bring it to the other people, and then we start rehearsing it. By that time, everybody kind of already knows the song and their parts, and then we start fine-tuning it and working on it. So it becomes a collaborative process, but the initial writing impulse is something that is usually just happening in one mind at a time. And it's always been like that for that band. I wrote up until Pelagial, and actually Phanerozoic 1 as well. I wrote everything 100% myself, and I'm very much used to writing and working like that. I need quiet. I need isolation. It sounds ironic this year to say that, but I need to just be with myself and some tools, or my guitar, or a computer or whatever, to create music. And I can't really do that at home. I'm not good at doing that with other people. But then, of course, once the initial ideas are there, then everybody has their say, has their input, and the songs transform and they get changed around. So, like I said, it does become a collaborative process then. Thank you, love.
One of the interesting aspects of the album for me was the way you guys merged the sound and the track listing, because every song, you already touched a little bit on it, and how eclectic the sound is on the record. Each song has its own soundscape, if you will, but the way you guys put it on the track listing, seems like to be a merger of these two worlds, which is the world of each song having its own fingerprint, but the world in which we have to put them together in order to create an album that flows from the first to the last. How do you guys balance that?
It's an interesting question, because the way it happened here was quite different from any other record we've made. Usually I have a very clear idea of song order, and like the album as a whole when we enter the studio for the mix of the record. But here that was not the case. We had the individual tracks, but I left a lot of choices up until almost the last moment. Like the song or the final song order and the transitions between the tracks were only decided when we were already mixing the record. I had, of course, certain things were clear. Like I knew Triassic was going to be the opening track. I knew Jurassic Cretaceous were going to be track 2 and 3. So basically, the Mesozoic half of the record. It's only 3 songs, but it's kind of like half of the record, both conceptually and time wise. That was pretty clear to me. It was more like the second half, the Cenozoic half, that was not so clear to me. And like I said initially, I was a bit afraid of that, but things just fell into place, and it worked out really, really well. And it was great to not be too attached to my pre-productions this time. I didn't want that. Like with all previous records, I worked out the whole soundscape realm in great detail already long before mixing the record. And this time I kept things intentionally a bit raw to not get too attached to certain ideas of how I want certain things to sound, but to be able to decide that and work with that once we really have all tools at our disposal in the studio. And then to recreate that live is the next challenge, and very much looking forward to that when we start rehearsing the material. But so everything happened a bit more spontaneous here, I would say, and that helped to get more of a bird's eye perspective, to keep that bird's eye perspective until the end. Because a lot of times when you make a record, you get so engulfed and immersed in it that you turn blind. You don't see certain things anymore, and then you need someone external to tell you, hey, this is fucking shit here, try something else, or you're uncertain about certain things. And when you keep that distance to it by not following your intuition to make everything already sound perfect for the pre-productions, but to just say, I'm going to decisively leave this raw and just leave it at the rough idea and then work it out in detail in the studio. By doing that, you keep that bird's eye perspective until a little later in the process, I think. And that's what we did here. What also really helped with the song order was Peter, our synth guy, who joined the band as an onstage band member only for Phanerozoic 1, the first part of this double album. He used to be our lighting guy before that, so he's already been kind of an offstage band member for quite some time. He really, really knew the songs. He's a drummer as well as a synth player. But for these 2 records, he really contributed a lot musically as well, and he kind of glued everything together with his synths. And not only the songs and like even the sound of the guitars, which is colored by the synths, but also the transitions between tracks. And I think this record becoming this journey, he also contributed quite a lot to making that happen in the end.
You mentioned earlier about the record being a journey. When I listened to the album, I felt that this album was a journey, but it felt like I went on a journey and I forgot my GPS at home. So like, I know where my starting point is. Do you know what I mean? But throughout the record, I wasn't really sure where my end journey was going to take me. So it's like whenever I get there to whatever there is, I'll know exactly where I am. But until then, I'm just going to enjoy this journey that I'm on without really focusing on the end result. Do you see the album that way?
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. It's and again that relates to what I said before, that it was like how it came together in a more spontaneous way and a more intuitive way. It's kind of like a journey, not knowing where it's headed. And when you listen to the first track, you don't instantly anticipate where it ends up, and how the record unfolds. I think in the beginning, and I realized that the other day, that it is kind of similar to what we did with Pelagial, but this time that was just something that happened that wasn't intentional. The first half of the record is really crowded. There's lots of information. There's these quite long songs that are quite intricate with complex arrangements and lots of things happening. And then the second half, it's kind of like thinning out and becoming more ambient, more electronic. It feels colder to me listening to it. And the song structures become a lot simpler on the second half. And that is a gradual process. And it wouldn't have worked to take a track like Jurassic Cretaceous from the first half and then put a track like Holocene, the closing track, from the second half right after it would just have been too weird. But it's kind of like gradually getting there. It's kind of gradually thinning out and becoming more spacious, and that's exactly what we did on Pelagial as well. The first half of that record was really busy, and then the second half was the longer and kind of quieter tracks, and also like slower and kind of heavier in a different way. And for that record, we also had these transitional songs like Boundless Vasts, for example, or Signals of Anxiety in the middle of the record, that served to transition from this very busy first half into this more, more spacious second half. And here it's the same thing, like Oligocene, the instrumental track in the middle of the record, kind of connects that super busy first half with the more ambient, spacious, cold second half of the record. And I think in the end, it's a gradual process, and you don't really realize where it's taking you. And this is what I like about it, and what actually worked out well in the end. Yeah, exactly.
You touched already on the synths. Are the synths, in your opinion, the element that really glued the album together? Because the sound is very eclectic from a track-by-track basis. There's really no two songs that sound alike. The structure is very dynamic within the tracks and the overall structure of the album. Like I said, there's this journey, but you kind of lost within the journey. So there's a lot of controlled chaos, if you will. Did you find that the synths was the glue that held it together?
Yes. I think I already answered that. It's absolutely, for me personally, that was what glued it all together. But it's also always different when you're involved as a musician, and when you're listening to it from an outside perspective. But the tracks were so different that in the beginning I didn't really know if this was going to work out. But the two components that made it work for me were the synths, and like just having a coherent sound for all tracks, because all the pre-productions we did were very diverse sounding. Also, we had different drum samples in different tracks. The guitar sound wasn't coherent, and when all of that was finally coming together in the studio, that although the tracks were very different, the guitar, or like the heavy guitar, would kind of sound the same in one track as in the other track. That was what also glued it together. And in that way, we've been a bit stricter there. We really wanted to keep the core instruments, like the sound of the bass, the sound of the heavy guitars. We wanted to keep that consistent and the same from the beginning to the end of the record, so that you at least have this as an element that ties the very diverse material together. And that also worked out really well. And then the synths and the transitions were another part that were quite important in that regard.
The vocals, I felt, were also very dynamic on the record. Perhaps not as dynamic as the sound is, but they're definitely not one size fits all from the first track to the last track. It was the result of how eclectic the sound is. You guys wanted to add a little bit more life on the vocal side as well?
We tried a lot of things regarding vocals on this record. Like, we spent a lot of time on it with it, and there was a point when Loic was on the verge of going crazy. It was also like, you have to keep in mind that we spent pretty much all of 2019 on the road, and we still had to finish this record in between, and that became a challenge because of all the tours and festivals. We started the year in India, and then did Australia and New Zealand. Then we did a long European tour, then had like 4 weeks at home where we recorded a little bit. Then we did European summer festivals, and then this tour of Armenia, Georgia, Russia, Kazakhstan, Japan, and then 2 weeks at home. And then we went on tour with Leprous in Europe for another 5 weeks. And then it was Christmas. So in between these tours, we had to finish the record, and we did 2 vocal recording sessions. And it was kind of like this type of session where initially you think, oh, great, we have a perfect plan what we're going to do. We're going to be done in 3 days. And then you just get deeper and deeper into it. And you realize that things get better and better, but they also take more and more time. And we ended up recording a lot of different versions for songs this time, and for vocal parts. And, a lot of times we had something that initially worked. We're like, oh, yeah, that's cool. But then going back to listen to it 2 days later, we were like, nah, let's try something else. And it was getting to the point where Loic just didn't know anymore if what we had recorded there was good or not, if it was right within the context of not only the song, but the record also, And there's no one who tells you, like, this is it, and this is right or this is wrong, usually. Usually I have to be that person, But for me, it was also becoming more and more difficult. because they were all not like good and bad options. They were all just like completely different takes on the same part, and that was mind blowing in a way, but also making it complicated to take decisions. Well, in the end, we spent a lot of time with the vocals, and I think I made the right decisions most of the time. And the way Loic and me work is usually that I play him a part and tell him a rough idea, and then he just improvises and sings without lyrics, with closed eyes. And there's usually awesome things coming out of that, things that I would have never envisioned, writing vocals myself. And then when we have the vocal lines ready, then I start writing lyrics, and then we re-record the whole thing. So it's a very complicated process that is partially very intuitive and partially very weird scientific. So it's it was the vocal session was, I think it was the biggest challenge with making this record, was recording the vocals in a year of heavy touring. But in the end, both Loic and me are really happy with the results, and it has to sink in a little bit. We haven't listened to the record in a long time, which is completely normal. When an album is done, then you want to close that chapter, and you don't listen to it every day. So we will see how it will feel after a year of touring. But with Phanerozoic 1, it was also like that. We've played 120 shows on that record, and the songs still feel really fresh. And all the vocal decisions we took there, which were not as difficult as this album, but also going in a similar direction already, we had no regrets there, and still feel that most things were done the right way. So I'm confident this will be the case here as well.
I got to ask you about one of my favorite songs on the album, and feel free to say that you're absolutely wrong and you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But listening to Eocene, I almost felt like there was a little bit of a reggae undertone to that song.
A reggae undertone? Interesting.
Yeah, like it was almost like a little bit of a ska feel to it, a little bit of a reggae. I mean, like
there's a little
really
bit of
fake.
A backbeat going on. It's not really like a reggae backbeat. It's more like a strange 13/8 pattern, I think, but it has a bit of that. Yeah, a bit of that vibe. I haven't looked at it that way. Interesting. Yeah, that song was an accident, really. That's based on a guitar line that we already used in Jurassic and in Cretaceous, and I was just playing that in the rehearsal space, and Paul was all of a sudden started playing a totally different beat over it. And at first it just sounded weird, but then I was like, oh, this is actually really cool, and a totally different perspective on the exact same musical idea, and then we started like building another song around that. And when we recorded drums, that song had not really taken shape. It was just like 3 parts, basically. So we just recorded them and arranged them later, and it turned into a really bizarre track. It's one of the most bizarre Ocean tracks, I think. But but it found its place in the middle of the record. And this is something we've done here quite a few times, like using an idea that has already been used in a different place on the record and putting it into a different context. This is one example. Another example is also regarding the lyrics, for example, as lyrics of Triassic, that the opening track, which reappear in the closing track, Holocene. And there's lots of cross references between the tracks, musically and lyric-wise. And that was also an intentional decision to reinforce that idea of eternal recurrence, which is going like a red thread through both of these records, basically. The idea that everything happens over and over again in infinite time and space, a very old idea. That is kind of like at the heart of both of the Phanerozoic records. And to reinforce that, we wanted to do that on this record also musically by having kind of like cyclical movements within the record, like reusing parts that had already appeared at the beginning in another song later, and cross references between the lyrics. So Eocene is one example for that.
Last question for you is, with the album just around the corner, September 25th, the album comes out. What are your expectations for this record?
I try to have none, which is becoming increasingly easier when you get older, I think. I'm really I'm really just going with the flow. I mean, I still read reviews and check our feedback on our Instagram page, for example, of course. But I really don't know what the future holds for this band, to be honest. Like, as a band, we're really strong. The lineup is really stable. Everybody has really reached the point where we're all really good friends, not just musicians working together. And we appreciate that we have this chance of being in this band touring together and playing strange places. And this has not always been the case in the last couple of years. And I think we're stronger than ever. So we want to tour, we want to play and take this to the next level. But as everyone's aware, that it's very difficult these days to make plans. We don't know when things will be returning back to normal here, but eventually it'll happen, and then we'll be taking the album out on the road. It's just really strange to release a record and not go on tour, which is the first time I think we've ever done that in the past 15 years. But there's other things you can do. We're really busy with Pelagic, with a record label as well, and the whole logistics of this album with all the box sets that we released and all the different vinyl variants are super time consuming. And I'm kind of glad that we have won a little bit of extra time this year to really be able to focus on that. And we may also be doing a live stream in November, something we have been talking about. We haven't done a full taken a full decision there yet. But there are other things you can do when you can tour. However, it does feel weird, and we're all itching to get back on the road, hopefully next year.
Well, I'm hoping to see you guys on the road soon. Well, at least as soon as is possible, considering everything that is happening. This is a great record. Congratulations on it. Thank you for taking the time today to chat with me about it. It was an absolute pleasure and honor to sit here with you and dissect this record a little bit, because there's a lot to digest. I just want to tell you one thing. Listening to this album, I listened to this album for 2 days straight before I even start taking notes for my album review for it. And I feel like I haven't even scratched the surface yet. So I think this is
a good thing.
Yeah, I think this is an album that's going to age extremely well. I feel like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you're going to listen to this album and you're going to discover something then that it took you 20 years to finally reach. It's one of those albums that just keeps on giving.
Awesome, man. That's a very nice wrap up. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time.